What's the biggest lie taught in history? Schools often spend a lot of time on the Holocaust but neglect other genocides in the 20th century, such as the Armenian genocide, Pol Pot killing about a quarter of the Cambodian population, or the North American genocide of the 80s where the Guatemalan army wiped out indigenous villages killing about 200,000 people. Edit. Just to clarify the lies through omission. That people thought the world was flat before Columbus. You'll learn this next year. Followed up by you should have learned this last year. Einstein never failed math. In fact, when he was shown a clipping from Ripley's Believe It or Not where it claimed that, he responded, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15 I had mastered differential and integral calculus." Source. I'm not sure it's a lie taught in school, but it's a huge misconception that nobody corrects until college. Our founding fathers absolutely hated each other. I'm talking about I will try to punch you in the face when I see you. Hate. Our country was astoundingly founded on the backs of people arguing on a daily basis. Especially Jefferson. A lot of people hated him. Adams. Hamilton. Even Washington had beef with him. It's astonishing our country was established the way it was, when you think about it. Biggest? No. But the one that nags me the most is the myth of Poland being so primitive and backwards that they tried to fight German tanks with riders on horseback. How it actually happened. Poland did have cavalry units, as did most armies. At a place called Krojanty, Poland did deploy their cavalry against German troops. They sent their cavalry against an infantry and won that battle. What followed was Germany came in with tanks and artillery and forced a Polish retreat, although it nonetheless stopped Germany from advancing. Then after, the Nazis began circulating a rumor that they'd had a sweeping victory when Poland charged their sophisticated tanks with horses, because it makes your war effort look good if you portray your enemies as a bunch of idiots. After the war ended, historians had a tendency to forget that the German Department of Propaganda might not be the most accurate source of information. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un's grandfather, was most likely an imposter. The original Kim Il-sung was a general in many Korean militia groups and a key player of several liberation movements that supported the independence of Korea from Japan, and, allegedly, an officer in the Soviet military during World War II. Records of any influential member of Korea's movements were spotty back then, but the consensus was that he was an older person. The Kim Il-sung that the Soviets trotted out and installed as the leader of North Korea was advertised as the same person, but was barely 30 years old. Jews were the only ones who were persecuted and died in the Holocaust. I'm a Jew, and I know this to be untrue. Nero played the fiddle while Rome burned. First off, the fiddle didn't even exist back then, and secondly, when Nero heard of the fire he actually raced to the city to direct efforts to save it and provide aid to the citizens. In Mexico there is a very famous tale of Los Niños Heroes, the Kid Heroes, which takes place during the Mexican United States conflict in which the US had reached the capital city of Mexico, where they attempted, and succeeded, to take the castle of Chapultepec. Right before the attack at the castle, which served as a cadet training institution, the generals warned the cadets to flee. According to Mexican history, 6 cadets stayed between the ages of 14 and 21 to defend the castle alongside the soldiers situated inside. One by one the kids are thought to die historically, each playing a major role in the defense of the castle. The most famous story of the boys was the 14-year-old kid who reportedly took the Mexican flag and threw himself off the castle to protect the flag from the hands of the Americans. This legend is widely known through Mexico, being taught in every single school in the country as a historical fact. There is even a monument honoring the 6 kids in which their bones are supposedly laid out. However, the reality is that the 6 kids who stayed at the headquarters were killed, as all 6 of them hid in the provisions warehouse and 2 American soldiers embarrassed them publicly and executed them. Remains under the monument dedicated to them have reportedly included bones of American soldiers and even dog bones. I'm going to bring up the lie of omission like other did, the abuse of Nanking and the brutality of the Japanese during World War II. This was not covered in any of my history classes and I just learned about it at the age of 28. That we are the good guys. With few exceptions we, whichever country or community is, Consider ourselves the good guys. Funny example. In Niagara, USA, the redcoats are the bad guys. Cross a bridge and the redcoats are the good guys. Napoleon was short. He was an average height for his time. Not so much a lie as more of an omission due to the many dark parts of US history that never get heard from again. I learned about these after I was done in school. The Tulsa Race Riot in 1921 and Operation Wetback in 1954. Edit to add the word and. That the French surrender or don't win wars. French surrender in World War II is easily mocked despite the fact that the Germans' rapid advance gave the Allies very little time to react. 20 years before this, France stood blooded but resolved in the First World War. 75% of the Western Front was held by the French, and battles like Verdun show how determined they are in fighting. The list is almost endless with wars France fought, many alone and against great odds. The Napoleonic Wars is one of the best examples of France's ability to fight the rest of Europe and succeed for over 15 years. Despite British propaganda, France was able to knock Britain back over the Channel, defeat the huge coalition army of Austria and Russia, beat Prussia and 5 European coalitions. Half understanding of France during the Second World War seems to have blinded people to one of the longest and most successful military nations. I would assume that it depends on where you live. In the US, I never had the religion problem. No part of the Bible or other religious text was taught to me as historical fact, and I went to a Catholic school before I went to junior high. I'd say that one of the biggest lies I encountered were lies of omission. How did Hitler come to power? How did he get as far as he did? What were the major issues leading to the US Civil War, other than slavery? Lots and lots of those kinds of things that are just left out because it's not very popular to speak about Hitler or the Confederate US in any kind of favorable light, but it's ridiculous to not try to learn and understand how and where they went wrong. It's quite sad, emo. The Boston Massacre. It wasn't really a massacre, as the story you get told in like 3rd grade says. Some British soldiers started killing people at random, but that is way off. A group of teens walk up to a British soldier and start tormenting him and laughing at him. Eventually a crowd forms, and they start throwing rocks, snowballs, etc. at the soldier. A nearby officer calls over some other soldiers and rushes to his aid. Nobody knows who opened fire, but it was more or less a small battle, and less of a massacre, as only 5 people actually died. It's not necessarily part of typical school curriculum, but the huge misconception that the Romans Greeks were gay. They didn't view sexuality in terms of gay versus straight. This is contemporary thought being forced upon social mores of the past. In the ancient world, sexuality was defined as passive versus active partners, or in other words, the penetrated versus the penetrator respectively. For lack of a better term, the latter was seen as more virtuous than the former. So a man could penetrate another man and it was seen as better than being penetrated. The penetrator wasn't regarded any differently. Obviously, women would be at a disadvantage in such a social system, but they didn't have as many rights as men anyway. This is also why the Vestal Virgins were held in such high regard, because, despite being women, they were, ideally, never penetrated, essentially giving them a virtuous status as that of a man. Kinda off topic but kinda relevant. BTW college level. The other day I heard a classmate say, wait, America will be part of the bad guys in WWII, in reference to Trump and the Russians. I told him war doesn't have good and bad guys. There are winners and losers. Winners are always right and losers are always wrong. Double quote. I can't pick one, but 1. The Crusades were aggression of Catholic European barbarians on peaceful Muslims. 2. Middle Ages were far more primitive compared to ancient times. It depends who we exactly compare to whom. Medieval Europe were far more civilized than it's taught. I can throw as well Germans invented concentration camps. British did. Polish death camps. In fact, German death camps on Polish soil. And much more. I've learned one certain thing from the history so far. It's never ever simple and one-sided, as it's believed. Gettysburg is not the northernmost battle in the Civil War. It was the Battle of Scroot Farms. My favorite lie is that British pilots convinced everyone they were so good at their jobs because they ate carrots and it helped make their eyesight better. In reality, it's because the British had radar secrets they were trying to hide from the enemy. My other favorite lie is how the Allies fooled the Axis powers into not knowing where they were gonna land on D-Day. The training, the logistics and everything else was all managed to be kept a secret, which I think is pretty amazing considering the size and scale of it. Well, as a history teacher myself, I just covered a unit on the American Revolution with my 8th graders. Many people have probably heard the poem Paul Revere's Ride, or have at least heard the story. What most don't realize, however, is that Paul Revere isn't the man who warned the townsfolk to arm themselves against the coming threat. Paul Revere and two others, William Dawes and Samuel Prescott, rode to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock of the coming danger, but all three were stopped by British soldiers. Of those three, Paul Revere was detained, while the other two managed to escape to warn Adams and Hancock. Essentially, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem is about a real event, with real people, but isn't entirely accurate. In spite of that, it's still one of my all-time favorite poems. I think the whole vaccines give your kids autism has to be towards the top. 15 years of gullible parents were like duck progress. That half of the Irish population died because of a potato famine. While we did suffer from the blight, the fall in population was helped by Britain, preventing food from being imported, and controlling the food that remained in the country. We are still being taught that it was the potato blight that destroyed the country. People constantly say, Luke, I am your father, when it's actually no, I am your father. From everyone, we're the righteous good guys, and when we kill people it's only to help them and protect the innocent. Anyone who opposes us is an evil bad guy who hates, insert thing here. Every armed group of crazies in the world tells that one to themselves about their own history, while they go around killing and kidnapping anyone who resists their good guyness. The myth that the Catholic Church opposed science during the Middle Ages. Wouldn't call it the biggest lie, but the whole Polish soldiers charging tanks on horseback with lances thing is starting to get pretty damn old after some 80 years. Argumentatively, my AP US history class taught me that the Civil War was fought over states' rights, but not necessarily slavery. Can anyone clarify? Money doesn't make you happy. Well, yay, but I'm sure you're pretty happy when money pays your bills, buys you a car, buys you food that you like, and allows you to survive rather than having to hunt and farm your whole life. Anything regarding inventions, people in power, and Native Americans. America won the War of 1812. Till I had good history teachers. That Christopher Columbus was the only one who thought the world was round. The Greeks predicted the circumference of the earth very closely, and that knowledge was never lost to civilization. The argument he had with Queen Isabella was about size, not shape. That the US Civil War was fought over states' rights instead of slavery. That Native Americans were peaceful before the white Europeans showed up. In fact, many tribes did not get along with each other. I always hated the myth that America before European colonization was some pristine virgin land. They painted Native Americans as completely integrated with their natural surroundings and having little to none environmental impact, when in reality there were enormous sprawling cities dotted across North, Central, and South America. The introduction of smallpox and other diseases wiped out the evidence of these population centers by the time large-scale European colonization arrived, and the virgin land theory was perpetuated. Article. Let them eat cake, really, people. Relevant to today, GB, France, etc. were the good guys in World War I as far as high school was concerned. In truth, there were no good guys and there was no fight for freedom. Just wars orchestrated to see who gets to keep the most land that shouldn't belong to them. I won't wear a poppy to remember the war. I'll wear it to remember the lives wasted fighting a war that shouldn't have happened. That good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. The idea that Rome fell and this new nation of Byzantium took its place in the East. The story of the Middle Ages, the Great Schism, And the rise of Islam only makes sense with the context that Rome was still thriving in Constantinople. That Santa Claus isn't real. You expect me to believe that parents stay up and wrap all those presents? It's rubbish, I say. That The Simpsons had animated the Trump escalator scene and his presidency campaign announcements 15 years before it actually happened. It's just so plain wrong, yet all of the major newspapers in my country are reporting this as fact. The Sun, not a reputable source, had Simpsons Trump on the front page, for example. Yes, on the 19th of March 2000 a Simpsons episode Bart to the Future aired, which featured Bart as a slacker and Lisa as president in the year 2030. Lisa states that she has inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump, which was a joke referring to both his failed economic ventures and his failed running for president that year. Trump himself, however, does not appear in the episode. Now, on the 7th of July 2015, a short clip was released on YouTube called Trump-tastic Voyage, which was a parody of the 16th of June 2015 announcement. Idiotic conspiracy theorists, for some reason, linked images from the clip to the 2000 episode and claimed that The Simpsons had accurately predicted both the escalator scene and the announcement right down to the very detail 15 years before it had happened. Unfortunately, it was picked up by the mindless media, and sheeple failed to see that the images both include smartphones and the HD animation style, never of which were even though about in 2000. Nevertheless, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Now lots of people know that The Simpsons had predicted a Trump presidency in 2000, but most think that it was an actual scene and not an offhand joke. Lies my teacher told me. Everything Your American History textbook got wrong is an amazing book if you ever want to go into some deeper detail about some of the subjects being discussed here. You can find here for free, or go buy it, up to you.